So I owe you an apology in advance because I was notified that I'm giving this talk like 10 minutes ago. So I'm not completely sure that I have all slides in place, but I will do my best for you. And it's also my third talk at this conference. So let's have some fun. This talk is not very technical. It's about skills, soft skills that I think are important to have when you're working as a software engineer or anything. So let's start. The art of asking questions. Are there any questions already? Yeah, I know I'm not supposed to start like that, but since it's an emergency replace, why not? Right, but actually, if you still do have questions, you can join Slido and add them while I'm talking. Let's skip this part because, or maybe we can do that. How about audience participation? Would you like to answer my questions? Yeah, so let's do that louder, okay? I will count 3, 2, 1, and you will shout the answer. If you are up for this, then 3, 2, 1. You can do better, guys. I know there are not a lot of you, but still, you can do better. Let's relax. This is the second day of the conference, and the speaker could not make it, so let's just relax and have fun time. 3, 2, 1. 1 plus 1 equals 3, 2, 1. No, it's not 2, guys. Come on. It's 1. Anyway. I wanted to talk about my personal journey, the trouble that I've been through in my life. In December of 2016, I moved to the United States seeking for my American dream. But I didn't speak English. So while I was traveling and taking these pictures, having no idea that I would ever publicly show them, some of them are ridiculous, I was thinking about my first technical interview. Because you all know, right, how difficult it is. Rounds and rounds of questions, whiteboarding, algorithms, maybe you don't use them in production, but you're still supposed to know them and remember them. Like, your hands are shaking, they're sweating, you're thinking, oh my God, I need to do that. All of that, but in English, which is not my native and which I didn't know. So I was thinking, oh my God, I need to come up with some kind of plan. Like, how do I nail this interview, right? And then I thought, what if I will prepare questions, and while my interviewer answering them, I will just sit, because everyone loves talking about themselves. So while they enjoy answering the questions, I will just pretend that I know English very well. Yeah, cool plan. But before I'm going to give you a framework how I nailed it, I want to talk about this particular tweet. So Scala invited me to give my first keynote ever. And I was so thankful, and I was so proud and so grateful that I wrote this tweet, maybe the most important tweet in my career so far. And you know, after all these years, I still cannot spell the word grateful. So 65,000 views, 65,000 people know me as the only bad speller still. And the reason I'm saying that to you is that, yes, I was really, really nervous before my first technical interview in the United States, even though I had experience as a software engineer, but still I was very nervous. But then I realized I don't have to be perfect, and you don't have to be perfect either. The most important part that you're passionate and you care about what you do. So I decided, okay, it's too late to remove that. Someone already retweeted that, someone already liked that, so let's use that in my keynote, why not? So back to my plan. I Googled and I figured that Joel Spolsky wrote this article about how to evaluate your own system or how to evaluate someone else's system when you join a company. And that was about 20 years ago, and some of these questions are pretty outdated. Like, for example, do you use source control? So do you use source control in your project? Yeah, that's possibly not like a question that you would ask at an interview, because they would be like, what? Isn't it too late to ask that? So I came up with some questions which I thought are important. And the first topic is, of course, technical details, because we're a software engineer, we love talking about that. And here, I want to put emphasis on something new, like how, for example, the company brings and integrates, adopts new projects and new libraries. Like when I come to the interview, I ask them, actually, how do you do that? And I remember that story. I was a Java developer, Java refugee, someone told me. Yes, and I came to the interview at around when Java 8 came out, and they introduced this Stream API, where you can filter, map, flat map, and do all these cool things on a collection, on a stream, and that's all immutable. Probably I was doomed to be a Scala developer when I loved that part. So I came there and the interviewer gave me a problem, some kind of like graph algorithm, and I started to solve that. And at some point I just asked him, are you familiar with the streaming API? And it turns out he wasn't, so I started to explain him the idea, and then I was solving the problem using that API, and he was like, oh my God, I know, here you need to use filter. And that idea that you can pass the function inside function just sparked in him, and he solved the problem himself. He solved that, and without even noticing that, because he was involved, because we were collaborating. And that's something that I think very important during an interview, to feel like you're collaborating, you're part of that company. What do we care right now about? Would you care about Scala 2.13? Did you all adopted Scala 2.13? Did you move to that? Why not? It's not easy, huh? But as early you think about that, like, do I support Scala 2.11, or do I like cross-compile? What do I do? Do I use this like collection library, what is called? I don't remember, but anyway, this is one step. But what about another step? Did you try to compile your project with Dotty? Did you look at other projects that do that in Dotty? As early the project, the company starts to think about that, as easier will be the transition, the migration to Dotty, right? When you come to an interview, you want to know, like, I'm passionate about these things, I want to use new features, all this new cool stuff, new types, like union types and all of this from Dotty. Did you already think about that? So my point about interview is that this is two-way process. Not only you are interviewed, but also you are interviewing the company. You want to know whether you like their culture or not. Are you going to be additive to their culture? Is that the real place where you want to work? Another important topic, in my opinion, is like development process. I know that a lot of people from functional programming side of Scala often struggle with how their performance is measured. So you want to know that in advance. You want to talk through that with your manager, with your team members in advance. And I'm personally very annoying candidate. I never say yes to an offer until I actually see someone with whom I'm going to work on day-by-day basis. Like, I asked for additional interview for a company so that I could talk to a team member and figure out whether we get along really well or not. because I'm really into it. I want to make sure that once I'm onboarding, I want to stay with that company for a longer time. I don't want to continue and go through this rounds of interview again. And the last thing is education and improvement. There are lots of them, and I wrote the whole blog post about that. But speaking of education and improvement, I want to point on the thing called personal brand. For example, when I joined 47 Degrees, I didn't join the company. I didn't join the just random consultancy. I joined people because I knew them from community, and I knew what they're up to. I knew their capabilities. I knew what I can learn from them. And this is very important to let your people, if you're leading a team, if you're running a company, you should think about like your talents are greatest assets of your company. And if your clients know your people, then they know what kind of expertise what kind of things they can do and what expertise they will bring. So if you're looking for questions that you can ask as an interviewer, I encourage you to check out my blog post because I have over 100 questions there, and they're not, because when I wrote them, I was Java developer. They're not specific to Scala or anything, but you will grab the idea of how I can build that. And I wrote this poll on Twitter and asked people like how many questions they think is comfortable for them to ask. And look at that, 14% of people do not ask questions at all. And okay, 10 of them I probably, after giving this talk several times, I hope to decrease that number and let people know what they can ask. But 4%, this is ridiculous for me. They think it's useless. Well, it's not. I bet they don't ask for directions when they are driving. Like, I know my way. I know. And they get confused. And 5%, 18% ask for 5 and more questions, which is the way to go, because 1 to 5 questions, when you come to Starbucks, they ask more questions than 1 to 5. Like, do you want flat white, decaf, I don't know, some kind of syrup, all of this. And I remember that vividly when I came to my first interview. That was my birthday. And for some reason, I learned that by heart. I wasn't fluent in English, so I was just repeating the same words, saying like, hello, I'm Oli. Today is my birthday. I have questions. If I look stupid, that's just, they're not on the list. All of that with hard accent and wrong intonations. But I did get the job. So I just want to point out how questions can make you more successful. It's a very simple idea, just ask more, but it's really powerful. So let's turn it around and talk about questions as an interviewer. So Joel Spolsky again said, do whatever you want, but make the candidate write some code. Because this is their production value, right? How they can write a code. And this is not technical talk, so I'm not going to talk about technical questions, although I think that every project should tailor the questions to every company should tailor questions to the project and do not ask like a lot of generic questions, but be specific to what your company or what your project has at the moment. Don'ts. So this is a tricky question. Let's vote on that. So we have a function and we have another function inside, and with printing a value. So let's think for a bit and try to shout the answer. So 3, 2, 1. I cannot hear you. This is easy. 3, 2, 1. Is that confusing? It's Scala Puzzler. It's from Scala Puzzler's book. And to be honest, I do not think that this is a good question for an interview because it's really confusing. And if you're cannot, the correct answer is B. But that's okay if you don't know that, because if you are doing functional programming, you probably have no idea, not even functional programming, but if you're a Scala developer and you never had experience with Java, you probably don't even use return ever, and you have no idea what it does. So that's okay. Also, it's not D because by default, it ignores unreachable code, but if you're really into it and always use Rob Norris flags, then it would fail. So I wanted just to show that questions should be, should show you something, you should learn something about candidate instead of just show them how smart questions can be. And yes, this is the most tricky question. As a podcaster, I tend to ask a lot of questions. Like, I ask questions all the time. I ask my guests about their experience, and I do interviews as well. And I never ask people seriously, tell me about yourself, because usually I do have some kind of CV, and I can read through that, and I can ask questions specific to that person instead of like wasting time and confusing them by such a generic question. I encourage people. I think we should like spend our time a little bit on CV or on like looking at their LinkedIn and whatnot, and then ask specific question. Tell me about your like university project. I think it looks cool, but tell me more. Another type of question is self-serving question. What do you know about our company? Why did you decide to apply to our company? Oh, well, you know, I just clicked on that easy apply button in LinkedIn, and that's why I'm here. Or there is this abbreviation, FUNK, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, whatever, and I applied just because I think your company is cool. Yeah, I have no idea what you do in your particular project because Amazon is like huge, or Microsoft or whatever. And what am I supposed to answer when someone asks me a question like that? Or people who are working for startups, also somehow I should know about your startup. I'm sorry, I don't know, like really. So try not to do that, but ask, hey, I want to tell you about our company, stop me if you think that you already know all of that. And don't go too personal, of course. I had like such a bizarre experience when someone from startup asked me, are you pregnant, or are you going to be pregnant? Because we have deadline and we cannot move that. So sometimes people ask if I'm married, but that's not necessarily malicious. What they actually mean that the company is family friendly, and you can always bring +1 to our like team building events. But let's put that way. Don't ask too personal questions. If you want to say, hey, we have like football team, board games team, and everything, just put it there, and don't ask people, are you interested in any sports? Well, I don't follow anything. I don't know. Does my like playing with monads count as a sport? Maybe it's not. Let's talk about positive things. So Voltaire said, judge a man by his questions rather than his answers. What that made me think that probably is an interview where I want to ask a question which will result in a question. I also do talks about recursion schemes, so that probably affected me, and I tend to ask questions that result in questions and so on. So this is one of the examples, like you just gather information, whether they understand or not the requirements for this position. Ask them, what would you ask if you were interviewing someone for that? So say, I'm interviewing now, you're an interviewer, what would you ask? And that can be, that can show their passion and also how well they fit. If someone who does compiler and things, who is fascinated about that, come to a place where they are going to build like web application, do this all, create, update, database, request, probably they will not be too happy and they're overskilled for that. You need to learn that in advance, right? Or if that's a just recently graduated someone and they didn't have particular experience in the like hands-on in the project in enterprise, but you still want to learn about them. What questions should I ask to let you show your potential fully? And that can result in really interesting discussions. And I had some of them. I had someone who came from bioinformatics environment, and they talked, like they got so passionate and they were talking a lot about different things and different researchers there. And I would never probably learn that if I didn't ask that question. And also that showed me that the person is definitely into learning, and that could be a great opportunity if we could have them on our project. Or you can gather feedback, what questions from the one that I asked you were the good one and why. Or going back to technical discussions, you can give them a stack trace or log statement. And so, for example, they spent some time on investigation and they still couldn't figure out what's going on, and you just give them a code sample and stack trace and let them ask question on Stack Overflow. And you want to make sure that their question makes sense, which will show you when you're collaborating with the person that their ability to explain things briefly first, and second, that they ask that in a secure way. Like they removed all password if you happen to have them in the log statement. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but still. And that they removed all like package names or company name if you don't want to expose that. And also, when you ask, how many of you actually asked questions on Stack Overflow or Gitter ever? Yeah, less than half, but my experience is that when I ask the question, sometimes I try to reduce the number of lines so that it would be like minimal reproducible code sample, and then, oh my God, this is 3 lines, and now I can put everything in my head, and all of a sudden I know the answer already, right? So this is the power of questions. You can answer them yourself if you ask the correct question, the right question. So, but we're here at the conference, and we do networking and collaboration here, and I want to talk about like a few things that I think are important in the process in any company. The first one is the feedback. And that happens when you when you're participating in PR reviews, architectural discussions, design meetings, and all of this. How are we doing on time, by the way? Okay, so let's wrap this up like really quickly. So, how do you feel when you join a new company? Probably less confident than when you spent like 5 years there already, right? And I wanted to talk about my friend, and I decided to name her Dorothy because the nickname is Dottie. So, and she's a Python developer. So, Dottie Python 3 developer. Came to her a new job. She got the offer from a company and she needed to build a pipeline for some kind of data analysis. And she needed to choose an assembler. And she went to very fancy university, and she, it was led by a Nobel Prize winner, so all people were cool, and they were building their own assembler, and she was like, oh gosh, I need to use that, right? And she used that, created the PR, and her team leader said, you should use different one. And like the name, whatever, you should use X. And she was like, okay. And she started to rebuild her PR with that X, and then she was like having trouble, not really understanding why she should do that. Then she gained enough courage to ask, like, why do we do that? And it turns out that this is for historical reasons, because they always use that X, and they never actually considered anything else. And she figured that this is wrong. This is not how you give a feedback. It's not even feedback problem. It's how you approach the creating something, right? You need to know what are you building and why you're building this. Why behind is very important. Like, I need to use assembler. Why I need to use assembler X? Historical reasons probably not the best one. But anyway, she admitted that she did a mistake too. She went too preferential. Like, she was like, I went to fancy university and I chose that assembler, and she didn't think about like the result or metrics that would show that that assembler is the best choice. That was complete preferential, because I like that. People, I know them personally, I can rely, they have high standards and everything, but I have nothing to do about the goals of their project and my project and how they fit each other, but I like them, so I'll use. That can be negative too. Don't use this library. I don't like their maintainer. He's too controversial, whatever. And this is actually not only unhelpful, because it does nothing to achieve the result, but also it's toxic, because if you're in a position of approval, your team consciously or subconsciously tries to follow your preferences and tries to satisfy them, even if it's in conflict with the goal of the project, right? Incomplete. Use X instead was not right too, because it didn't show why behind that. Or some terrible story when someone would tell you this is terrible and you're like, why? I honestly don't know, right? Or like when someone tries to just promote themselves and show how smart and superior they are and bring attention to themselves. That's also not always malicious, it's just someone's style, but if you keep in mind what you're saying and why behind that, if you're reacting on something like, oh my God, this is terrible, you should, like, what I usually do, I just take 10 minutes and I think why I'm reacting like that, why that seems to me like super cool. Because I'm not focusing only on the bad things necessarily, on the good things too. Why is it cool? How I can make other things as cool as this one? So reactive critique is bad, no matter if it's good or if it's positive or negative. You still need to have a reasoning behind it. And yeah, the correct way, in my opinion, is to lead with a question, to ask as many questions as you can do, to show people that you care also not only about the thing that they're building, but the thinking behind it. You want to show that you're actually interested in that person, like how their mind work on that particular task or problem, how they solve that, what constraints or influencers they had there. And I actually use that with our clients because I'm going to different companies and do architectural reviews, and I ask a lot of questions like this because I need to collaborate, I need to stay positive. So unfortunately we don't have more time to talk about other things. I have a lot of stories about like analysis and COEs and 5 why techniques and whatnot. And this is a beautiful story of how I panicked and pushed it back into production, and how I thought that I worked at Expedia, that they would send me back to Siberia by booking a ticket on at Expedia.com. And that's actually the reason. Do not use enumerations ever. But anyway, that's the framework. Ask 5 whys, probably you've heard about that. Another interesting thing is a retrospective, like 3 simple questions, but that can make a huge difference at attitude and team building. When you do, like, you don't have to necessarily analyze things when something went wrong. You can do that on a regular basis and just create a questioning culture at your company. Make it so that people would feel comfortable to ask questions at interviews, whether it's interviewee or interviewer, at regular meetings, at correction of errors and root cause analysis meetings. So thank you. I won't have.
Thank you very much, Ollie.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we've run out of time for questions. So hopefully you can take it offline and find maybe the full presentation in another medium. Okay, thank you.